AITA for refusing to work Thanksgiving so my coworker can celebrate with her kids. I, 28F, have been at my current job for a little over 2 years now. It is a job that I truly love, and I feel honored to be part of it. It is demanding, and it requires a level of dedication that not everyone is willing to give, but I knew what I was signing up for. The downside, of course, is that it is a 365 days, year job. There are no days off where we can just shut everything down. Holidays, weekends, birthdays, someone always has to be there to keep things running. Because of that, working on major holidays is part of the deal, especially for those of us who are newer to the team. It is an unspoken rule that people who have been around longer get the first pick for days off, while those of us lower on the totem pole have to step up and cover the shifts that nobody else wants. On top of that, there is an informal expectation that employees without children will take on the holiday shifts so that parents can be home with their families. There is an especially strong sentiment that mothers, in particular, should be allowed to be home with their kids on Thanksgiving and Christmas. It is not a written rule, but everyone knows it exists. I have been working holidays since I started, and I never made a fuss about it, even though it meant missing out on time with my loved ones. But this year was different. This year, I was finally scheduled to have Thanksgiving off. It was my first major holiday off since I started, and I was over the moon about it. It felt like a small reward for my hard work and patience, and I was so excited to finally get the chance to celebrate properly. It was especially meaningful to me because I recently got engaged. My fiancé and I are in the middle of blending our families, and this would be our first Thanksgiving together as one big, united family. It was a huge milestone for us, and I was looking forward to it more than I can even put into words. My parents, his parents, our siblings, everyone was coming together for this special day, and I finally had the chance to be there. It felt like a turning point in my life, a glimpse into the future we were building. But then, on Friday, my coworker June approached me. June started the job at the same time as I did, so we are technically at the same level. She is a few years older than me because she went to graduate school later in life, and she is married with 2 young daughters. I knew where the conversation was going the second she sat down next to me, and I felt a sinking feeling in my stomach before she even opened her mouth. She asked if I would be willing to cover her shift on Thanksgiving so she could be with her children. She gave me that expectant look, the kind that implied this was not really a request but an expectation. I felt my face get hot. I had been looking forward to this holiday for months, counting down the days until I could finally be with my family and my future in-laws. I told her that I could not do it. I explained that this would be the first holiday where both of our families were coming together to celebrate, and it was important to me. I thought that was a reasonable explanation, but she frowned and said that her daughters deserved to have their mother with them on Thanksgiving. The way she said it, with that tone of moral superiority, made my blood boil. I was sympathetic to the fact that she had kids, but at the end of the day, we had both signed up for this job and knowing that holidays were part of the deal. I told her that maybe she could celebrate with them on a different day. Lots of people do that, and it is not unheard of to move a holiday celebration to fit work schedules. She did not like that response. She rolled her eyes and said I was breaking the informal code of the office. That phrase stuck with me, the informal code. I knew exactly what she meant. It was the expectation that people without children were supposed to sacrifice their own time and plans so that parents could have what they wanted. It was not fair, and I had no intention of giving in to it this time. I had done my time. I had worked holiday after holiday, missing out on precious moments with my loved ones, and now that I finally had the chance to be with them, I was not going to let guilt or peer pressure take it away from me. June was clearly irritated, but she did not push further. Instead, she walked away with a huff, making it clear that she was not happy with me. I tried to brush it off, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I got. Why was it that her choice to have children somehow made her more deserving of a holiday off than me? I wanted to spend time with my family too. I had people who loved me and wanted me to be there. But because I did not have kids, my time was seen as less valuable. It was infuriating. Later that day, I mentioned it to my mentor. She is in her 50s, has kids of her own, and has been at this job for a long time. I expected her to understand my frustration, or at the very least, acknowledge that the expectation was unfair. Instead, she gave me a long, knowing look and said that I should have agreed to cover for June. She said that June's kids deserved to have their mother with them on Thanksgiving and that this was not about fairness to me or to June, it was about doing what was right for the children. She told me that if I ever decided to have kids, would see things differently. That really got to me. I told her that I was already pretty clear on the fact that if I did have kids, I would not expect my coworkers to pay the price for my decisions. I would know what I signed up for, and I would not demand special treatment just because I had children. She just shook her head like she did not believe me, like she thought I was being naive. I left that conversation feeling even more frustrated than before. My job is an important one, and I take my responsibilities seriously. I am more than willing to make sacrifices for the greater good, but this was not that. This was not about serving the public or answering a call to duty. This was about my coworker trying to manipulate me into giving up something important to me because she felt entitled to it. So now, here I am, still holding firm to my decision but wondering if I am the bad guy for not bending to the pressure. I do not think I should have to sacrifice my holiday just because I do not have kids, but clearly, a lot of people think I am in the wrong. AITA. Update 1. After talking to my mentor, I tried to shake off the frustration, but it clung to me like an unwelcome weight. I wanted to vent, to get it out of my system, but I quickly realized I wasn't the only one struggling. June was also dealing with her emotions, though she was choosing a very different way to handle them. By Monday morning, the office felt different, subtly, but unmistakably so. There was a shift in the atmosphere, a coolness that hadn't been there before. Some colleagues were noticeably distant. They greeted me with half-hearted nods, their voices lacking the warmth they usually carried. Others avoided eye contact altogether, suddenly too busy with their screens or their paperwork whenever I entered the room. Then there were those who still treated me normally but with a newfound awkwardness, like they weren't sure whether acknowledging me too openly would put them in a difficult position. The sympathetic glances, the hesitant smiles, it was clear that something had been said, and that something was me. The worst of it, though, came from June herself. She had decided on a different approach, one that didn't require outright confrontation but still ensured I knew exactly how she felt. In group conversations, she had perfected the art of passive aggression, making small comments with just enough venom to sting without ever calling me out by name. It was subtle, but obvious enough that anyone paying attention would understand what she was doing. Over lunch, as people chatted about holiday plans, she sighed dramatically and said she just hoped her girls wouldn't be too sad without their mother on Thanksgiving. It was so hard, she continued, when some people didn't understand what it meant to be a mother, how it changed everything, how some of them would never know what it was like to have little faces looking up at them, asking if mommy would be home for the holidays, only to be told no. She delivered the words smoothly, like she was simply sharing a thought, but the way her eyes flickered toward me, just for a second, made it clear that this was not an innocent remark. The room had gone uncomfortably quiet for a moment before someone awkwardly changed the subject. That was how it went all morning. Small jabs, indirect digs, a performance of quiet martyrdom that cast me as the villain without ever explicitly saying my name. It was infuriating, but more than that, it was exhausting. Then something unexpected happened. Mark, one of the senior employees, pulled me aside. He had been with the company for over a decade, a veteran of the job and one of the most well-respected people in the office. He had 2 teenage kids, had been through the early parenthood years while working here, and had seen it all. He got straight to the point, telling me that he had heard about what happened and that he actually agreed with me. This job was tough on families, he said, no one denied that, but honesty mattered. June knew what she was signing up for, just like everyone else did. No one forced her into this career. No one tricked her into believing she would get every holiday off just because she had children. It was frustrating, but it was the reality of the work. And then, he told me something that struck me. Years ago, when his kids were little, he had been in a similar situation. He and another dad had been asked, no, expected, to cover the holiday shifts and the weekends because the mothers in the office insisted they needed to be home. They had gone along with it, not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting to be seen as selfish or inconsiderate, and he regretted it. He regretted letting that precedent be set, regretted reinforcing the idea that fathers could be the ones to sacrifice while mothers were protected, regretted not standing up for himself when he had every right to do so. He said he wished he had pushed back, that he had asserted his right to be with his own children instead of letting himself be guilt-tripped into giving up time with them. He told me that I should not let anyone make me feel guilty for holding my ground. He had seen it happen before, and it was not fair then, just as it was not fair now. This was not about selfishness, he said. It was about recognizing that we all have lives outside of work, we all have families, we all have moments that matter to us, and those moments should not be considered less important just because we do not have children. He told me that I deserved my day off, just as much as June deserved time with her kids, but that the difference was, I was not asking anyone to trade shifts so I could have that day off. I was not pressuring anyone to change their plans to accommodate mine. I stood there for a moment, letting his words sink in. It felt like the first real validation I had received since this whole mess started. Someone who had been through it, who had been on both sides, who had lived with the consequences of giving in to that kind of pressure, he understood. And more than that, he was telling me that I was right to stand my ground. I had been doubting myself, wondering if I had been too rigid, if I had been unfair, if I should have just given in to make things easier. But hearing him say that I deserved my day off, that it was okay to put my own plans first for once, made me realize something important. Fairness was not about giving in to guilt. I walked back to my desk with a renewed sense of certainty. June could gossip, the others could give me awkward looks, but I was not going to back down. I had spent enough time putting my own needs second to avoid rocking the boat. This affirmation gave me the strength to stand my ground. Update 2. I thought the drama would die down. I had made my decision, stood my ground, and received validation from someone who had been through it before. That should have been the end of it. I figured people would either move on or quietly hold whatever grudge they wanted to hold, and life at work would settle back into its normal rhythm. But that was wishful thinking, because by Tuesday morning, HR called me in for a meeting. The moment I saw the email request, my stomach dropped. I hadn't done anything wrong, but I knew how these things worked. The mere fact that HR wanted to talk to me meant that someone had complained, and I already knew who it was before I even stepped into the office. June. I sat down across from the HR representative, trying to keep my expression neutral, but my pulse was hammering in my ears. June had apparently gone to HR, claiming I had created a hostile work environment by making her feel unwelcome as a mother. The absurdity of it nearly made me laugh out loud, but I bit my tongue. According to her, my refusal to swap shifts was not just about scheduling, it was an attack on her personally. She said that I had deliberately alienated her, that I had made her feel unsupported, that my behavior was contributing to an unfriendly workplace culture. I was dumbfounded. Refusing to swap a shift was now considered hostility. Since when was no an act of aggression? Thankfully, HR wasn't buying it either. They asked me a few routine questions. Had I ever made negative comments about working parents? No. Had I been unprofessional in my conversation with June? Also no. They clearly weren't finding much to work with, because after a few minutes of going through the motions, they dismissed the complaint. But they still had to say something. That was how HR worked. Even when a complaint was flimsy, they needed to appear even-handed, so they wrapped things up by giving me a vague warning about maintaining team harmony. It was one of those meaningless corporate phrases that didn't actually mean anything, but served as a way to cover their bases. Be mindful of workplace dynamics. Keep things positive. Make sure no one feels left out. It was irritating, but at least the complaint hadn't gone anywhere. Still, the fact that June had taken it that far left a bitter taste in my mouth. It wasn't enough that she had tried to pressure me, wasn't enough that she had weaponized office gossip against me, she had actually tried to drag me into an HR dispute over it. That wasn't a misunderstanding. That wasn't just a disagreement between coworkers. That was an active attempt to get me in trouble for not giving in to her demands. I returned to my desk, tense but determined to move forward. I wouldn't give her the reaction she wanted. If she wanted to paint herself as a victim, she could do it without my participation. I had work to do, and I wasn't going to let this ridiculous situation pull me under. Then, later that afternoon, something happened that made my frustration turn into outright fury. Lisa, another coworker, approached me quietly while we were both grabbing coffee. She glanced around first, like she was making sure no one was listening, before leaning in and lowering her voice. She told me that she had overheard something important, something that changed everything. June had actually requested Thanksgiving off months ago. And she had been denied. She knew she was scheduled to work all along. She had known from the beginning that she wouldn't have the day off, and she had never planned to simply accept that reality. Instead, she had spent weeks, months even, waiting for the right moment to start pressuring someone else into covering for her at the last minute. This wasn't about being blindsided by a difficult schedule or realizing too late that she couldn't be with her kids. She had banked on the informal code to guilt someone into fixing a problem she created for herself. I felt a slow, seething anger build in my chest. She had played this whole thing like a game. I had spent the last few days second-guessing myself, dealing with side eyes from coworkers, enduring passive-aggressive comments, getting dragged into an HR meeting, all because June had gambled on manipulation and lost. And she wasn't even done. She had tried to escalate it, to paint me as the villain, to push the narrative that I was the one causing problems when, in reality, she had orchestrated this entire mess herself. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. What I wanted to do was march over to her and call her out in front of everyone. I wanted to lay out every single piece of information, to make it clear that she wasn't some helpless mother who had been treated unfairly, she was someone who had intentionally set the pieces in place to trap someone else into fixing her problem for her. But I knew better than to give her that satisfaction. This wasn't a fight worth having. She had already shown that she was willing to escalate things as far as she could. If I gave her the confrontation she wanted, who knew what she would try next? No. I had already won. HR hadn't taken her side. The shift still belonged to her. Her plan had failed. I wasn't going to waste another second of my time worrying about her. Armed with this new information, I was ready to let the situation go. Update 3. Thanksgiving week arrived, and despite the lingering tension in the office, I was determined to enjoy my hard-earned day off. I had spent enough energy on this ridiculous situation, and I refused to let it take up any more space in my mind. My plans were set, my fiancée and I were excited, and for the first time in years, I was going to have a holiday where I wasn't on the clock, wasn't exhausted from a long shift, and wasn't missing out on time with my loved ones. Then, late Wednesday evening, my phone buzzed with a message from Lisa. The second I saw her name pop up, I hesitated. I had put all of this behind me, or at least I was trying to. But curiosity won out, and when I opened the message, all my frustration came rushing back. Lisa's words were short but carried a punch. You won't believe what just happened. June had called in sick at the last minute. I stared at the message, a slow burn of irritation bubbling up again. Of course, she had. Everyone knew it was a lie. Everyone knew exactly what she was doing. After all, she had already exhausted every other option to get out of working on Thanksgiving. First, she had tried to guilt-trip me into covering her shift. Then, she had turned the office against me with her passive-aggressive martyr act. Then, she had escalated it all the way to HR in a pathetic attempt to claim she was being victimized. And when none of that worked, when it became clear that no one was going to take her shift voluntarily, she had gone for the last possible option, faking an illness and bailing out entirely. The kicker. Management had no choice but to scramble for coverage at the last minute. And they ended up calling in a senior manager to cover her shift, someone who was absolutely livid about being dragged in on a holiday because an employee had conveniently decided to fall ill the night before. That was the moment June lost whatever little support she had left. By Monday, the fallout had begun. The manager who had been forced to work was furious and wasn't about to let it slide. Apparently, the second they stepped foot in the office on Thanksgiving, they already suspected something was off. June's sudden illness had no warning signs, no gradual decline in health, no mention of feeling unwell leading up to it. Just a sudden, last-minute message that conveniently got her out of the very shift she had spent weeks trying to escape. So, the manager started looking into June's attendance record. It didn't take long for them to find something interesting. This wasn't the first time June had pulled something like this. A deeper dive revealed a pattern, one that made it clear this wasn't a one-time situation. June had a history of conveniently timed sick days, almost all of them falling around holidays, long weekends, or shifts she had previously been denied time off for. It was a pattern so obvious that even a cursory glance at her record showed something was up. Management was not happy. June was called into a serious meeting. From what I later heard, it was not a pleasant conversation. They laid out the evidence, pointed out the repeated instances of conveniently timed illnesses, and made it clear that they were aware she had manipulated the system to get out of working undesirable shifts. There was no denying it. It wasn't just my word against hers anymore. It wasn't an argument about fairness or work-life balance or who deserved what. The data didn't lie. The outcome of that meeting wasn't exactly public knowledge, but things changed after that. June was still employed, but something about her demeanor was different. She had always carried herself with an air of self-importance, the kind that made it clear she believed she was entitled to special treatment. But now, she was quiet. The smugness, the passive-aggressive comments, the veiled remarks about how some people didn't understand what it meant to be a mother, all of it was gone. As for me, I enjoyed my first holiday off with my fiancé and our families, guilt-free. The food, the laughter, the feeling of finally being present instead of rushing through a half-hearted celebration before heading into work, it was everything I had hoped for. I didn't spend a single second worrying about the office drama or wondering if I had made the right decision. And when I returned to work, I noticed something else. The so-called informal code that had dictated that child-free employees were expected to cover for parents had suddenly disappeared. No one dared to suggest I was selfish for wanting time with my loved ones. No one tried to guilt-trip me into taking on extra shifts. The unspoken expectation that certain people should always make sacrifices while others were entitled to special treatment had crumbled. Funny how quickly things change when someone gets caught playing the system.